Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. It is truly great to have you with us on this Thursday. Dave Revson and Jake Butt. It is fun this time of year to turn on the TV and see bowl games. I have found myself sucked into a couple that maybe I wouldn't have watched during the regular season if the same teams were involved, but it'll be great to get the Big Ten going.
How about that Western Kentucky game the other day?
Incredible
right? The quarterback had, what, like 6 career passes?
Yes.
He goes like 40 for 50?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
In fact, that was the one that I was talking. That was the one.
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's our bowl season, too. We're hitting our stride right now.
All of a sudden, I'm fired up about Western Kentucky and Old Dominion.
Yep, that's right.
I didn't see that coming. I got to be honest. But the impending bowl season for the Big Ten is our big story, and it all starts Saturday in Vegas. Northwestern, one of the great stories in college football this year. They'll take on Utah, Minnesota, and Rutgers, both in action after Christmas. After that, it's 6 games in 4 days. It's highlighted by 3 teams in the New Year's Six: Ohio State and Mizzou in the Cotton Bowl, Penn State and Mississippi in the Peach Bowl. Then on New Year's Day, Michigan and Alabama in Pasadena, the playoff semis. Jake and I will be there as part of the Big Ten Network's coverage. I want to devote the front end of this show today to breaking down that game. We'll obviously do it extensively when we're in Pasadena as well. But just big picture, before we kind of dive into the specifics, what stands out to you about this game?
The number one thing here to me is Saban versus Coach Harbaugh. Right? I mean, Saban, you don't need me to tell you about his history and his acumen. But for Coach Harbaugh, also a really damn good coach. You know, one of the few coaches that can do it at the NFL and the college level. But he's missing the national title, right? And this is the path right here. Along those lines, too, is you know, I grew up watching Alabama play, and there are some teams where you go back and look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, their entire 2 deep on both sides of the ball went on to play in the NFL, right?
Yes.
Alabama still is loaded with talent, but that's not their team this year. This is a winnable game, of course, for Michigan, but the battle between 2 head coaches, 2 great head coaches, to me is fascinating.
So let's dive into the Saban part of it. And look, Jim Harbaugh is a great coach, right? Like Urban Meyer was a great coach. Ryan Day is a great coach. James Franklin, we've been around a lot of great coaches here. Yeah. But I do think that in this generation, Nick Saban is going to go down, as of right now, unless somebody makes some sort of run here at the end of their career. He's probably going to go down as the one that people look at as the best, right?
Agreed.
And a lot of that is based on postseason success. And the difference between the postseason and the regular season is time. The element of time. And there's been a lot of discussion here in the build-up to this game about, hey, Saban's team is getting better, and now you're going to give him a month to prepare.
Yeah.
And how frightening that is for anyone, not just for Michigan. What do you think of that proposition? Like, why do you think Nick Saban is having? Part of it is great players, as you say. Part of it is players littered on NFL rosters. But there's got to be something else here. How much of that is that element of time?
Well, you know, the chance it works 2 ways, and I'll just paint the full picture to get into why Saban's been so successful. You know, you could say they're peaking, and wow, they have a chance to continue that momentum. But it's like a shooter in basketball. If you're hot, you don't want to come out of the game. You don't want a commercial break. You want to keep shooting.
Right.
So that's the potential. Obviously, Saban has proven that he knows how to handle this. It's an art, you know, to have a month off. Do you get your guys healthy? That's part of it. But you have to make sure they're engaged and strong and physical. Hey, do you know who you are as a team? How far away do you stray from that to try to bring in new looks to this game, right? These are all these layers to it. And for Coach Saban, it also becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, I think about Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. No matter when they're down, even Tom Brady. A lot of quarterbacks, when you're losing in the 4th quarter, you're like, man, this is not our day. But, you know, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, they've had so much success that even when you're down, no matter what, you believe that they're going to get it done again. That's Saban. Just by having him on your sideline, he's walked that path. He's won multiple titles. You just believe he can do that. He's mastered the art of it. And to lead into Coach Harbaugh, there's been some real interesting comments by the players. J.J. McCarthy said this year that the practice schedule has been tweaked. He said he felt the previous 2 years, they went a little too hard. They were a little sore mentally, physically into the game. You saw that in the Georgia game back in 21. Georgia was playing at a different speed that year. You know, in my own experience in 2016 when we played in the Orange Bowl, you know, I remember Coach Harbaugh called it Christmas camp. You know, instead of getting fresh, we were going to hit the ground running. We were a little tired coming out of that. So that's the challenge of a head coach is how do you weigh that with wanting your guys to be fresh mentally and physically, and then still making sure you're physically ready to pop and play a violent game?
And it's probably different than it was in the NFL, right? And I do think that that's a huge part of it. Just the gap in time is different. It has not been an area where Harbaugh's been overly successful. Again, he has one postseason win at Michigan, but I think if we learned anything about Jim Harbaugh, he's a really bright guy. I think he's going to take a look at this and figure out, okay, where could we tweak it? And it's interesting that J.J. McCarthy has said as much. You were hinting at Alabama's talent and kind of where it stacks up. And I think one of the interesting things in watching Alabama, the times I've watched them this year, is I don't look at the running back spot or the wide receiver spot necessarily in the way that you have in the past, which isn't to say they don't have great players there, because they have great players there. But is there someone who just you look at and say, I don't see any way you can stop that guy? It feels to me like that's not on that side of the ball. It's on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
Right? Defensively, they have some guys who really pop. Offensively, they have really, really good players. So, like, where does their talent stack up with Ohio State?
Yeah.
Maybe the most talented team that Michigan's played this year.
You know, you can kind of look at this like tiers. You know, towards the top, it's not just like one team. Occasionally, you'll have one team that's in just a different class, and I think that was Georgia back in 2021. That's been some Alabama teams. I don't think that that's this team this year. I think Alabama is right up there as talented as Ohio State. Even Penn State has a really nice roster. They're going to push a bunch of guys to the NFL. But when you start to, unpack this a little bit, their quarterback in Jalen Milroe is the one that keeps you up at night. And when I do these game preps and we have our conversations with the coaches and the coordinators throughout the conference, the one consistent thing that comes up when we talk to defensive coordinators is we do not like a quarterback that can run and is mobile. That keeps them up at night. Right. Of course, that's Milroe. I will say this, though. When you look at the numbers of, defense, offense, you start to peel back the layers, this is a very even matchup until the one that stands out. When you look at sacks allowed, like sacks given up, Bama is 125th in college football in sacks given up. Michigan's 33rd. In tackle for loss, Bama is 100th. Michigan is 6th. So
the one
just
thing
giving
I'd say,
up
though,
disruption.
The one thing I'd say, Alabama's only given up 8 sacks the last 5 games.
Yes.
Right? So I think a lot of that it does feel like their offensive line has gotten dramatically better. I mean, you watch Texas game, you watch the South Florida game, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this just doesn't look like a Saban offensive line at all. But clearly, Michigan's been the more consistent offensive line throughout the year.
And part of it is Milroe, too, maturing as a quarterback.
Yeah.
Sacks aren't always on the offensive line. It's also on the quarterback. And him being a playmaker, these things are double-edged swords where it's like, listen, we know you can create, we know you can run around and make plays, but you're risking some things. You're risking a sack. You're risking a potential errant throw or a fumble. So, that is a huge storyline in this game for Michigan. Even though Bama has given up sacks, I know they're improved. Michigan, I don't know that you necessarily strive for sacks. Your goal in this game is to be extremely sound in your blitz lanes, in your gap discipline. Ideally, you keep him in the pocket. And one thing that benefits them there, when you look at the strength of Michigan's defensive line, it's actually on the interior. I mean, they're 3 or 4 deep with those guys, Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. The edge rushers can then come off the pocket and not have to do any exotic move. Just rush on the outside shoulder of the tackle with the quarterback inside, and you'll collapse the pocket because those big fellas on the inside will push him back. You want to force him to be a pocket passer as much as possible in this game.
Right, don't let him break contain. Interesting to look at J.J. McCarthy, because I think that for a long time I have seen J.J. McCarthy not necessarily like Jalen Milroe. I mean, they're different players. Jalen Milroe is an incredible threat with his legs. He's run for 12 touchdowns this year. But J.J. McCarthy is a very good athlete. He is very mobile, and it has just felt like here over these last few weeks, like that hasn't been a huge part of his game. And I think it's natural to ask. I mean, there has been some admission on Michigan's part that he's been a little bit banged up, that he hasn't been fully at 100%. How much can this month benefit him? Because it's the same concern for Alabama, right? Like there's not. It's funny when you say, like, we don't like mobile quarterbacks, because to your point, no one likes mobile quarterbacks, right? It's not unique to Michigan, or certainly Alabama doesn't want that either. How much can J.J. McCarthy impact the game with his legs?
Well, you bring up a great point. This month off is extremely valuable to JJ. There was the first time it became real clear to me that he was dealing with something was the Penn State game, where he made some of those plays. That was tough sledding. Penn State's got a great defense, and JJ was able to run and do so. But he got up, and you could tell there's something a little bit off. This month off is critical for him to get healthy, because in a game like Alabama, you need all hands on deck. And then it's going to be a few plays in this game where read 1, read 2 aren't there, and you got to go create. That's what makes JJ special. That's why he was competing with Cade McNamara, even though Cade led him to a Big Ten championship and beat Ohio State. He's got that rare talent. He's going to need to do that once again in this game.
Let me ask you this. I do think there's a lot of doom and gloom nationally about Michigan. I think, like, you talk to people in the sport, and they all say, oh, well, Alabama's the better team there. And it's somewhat astonishing to me, given that Michigan is the #1 seed, given the way that they played, how consistent they've been through the course of this year. So I want to flip it a little bit. Like, tell me an area where you look at it and say Michigan clearly has the advantage here.
It would be their defensive front disruption versus Alabama's offensive line, and that's a key element in this game. This is an even matchup. It's a phenomenal matchup. This is going to be a great game to watch. It's going to be a close game. I expect a lower scoring game, and it's going to come down to a handful of plays. But to me, like, this is a mental thing, right? You go back a few years, and Coach Harbaugh has referred to this season as a spiritual journey. I think that's a great point, because a few years ago, you can't beat Ohio State. All right, Michigan, you're pretty good, but you can't beat Ohio State.
Right.
Okay, well, you did it. Well, you can't beat them in Columbus, and you can't win the conference. They have overcome that. They've broken through those ceilings. The next part in this process is to win a playoff game, and it's alongside that, it's to beat the best that the SEC has to offer. In that sense, this matchup is perfect for Michigan. We've said on this show all year, I know I'm not the only one, I felt they've been the best team in college football for the majority of this season, all season. They have earned the right to go into this game and play confident. Blake Corum said it when he was interviewed, once they knew they were going to play Alabama. He said, they got to play us. We don't have to play them. They have to play us. They've earned the right to say that with confidence.
Agreed, and they have been incredibly consistent. It is strange, other than I think there is a notion in life that you don't believe someone can do something until they prove to you they can do it.
Fair enough.
And Michigan hasn't proven under Jim Harbaugh that they can win games of this caliber, and I think that's why people look at them and say, well, Nick Saban's proven that his Alabama teams can win games like this, and so we're going to expect them to do that. And as you say, no one thought they could beat Ohio State until a few years ago. No one thought they could do it in Columbus. All the things that you said, I would echo that sentiment. You've got to do things for the first time.
Yep.
And this is something they need to do for the first time.
As great as this program is, and as great as they've been recently, this is the next step.
Yep.
This is the clear next step to win a playoff and to beat an SEC team. And for that reason, among many others, I can't wait to watch.
6 straight bowl losses, 8 of their last 9. They can erase that.
My junior year was the last bowl win.
Yes, they can erase that entire narrative on New Year's Day in Pasadena. That is brought to you by Walgreens. It focuses in on the Cotton Bowl matchup between Missouri and Ohio State. Tigers have had a really good year. It's a team that finished 6-7 a year ago. They got dramatically better on the offensive side of the ball. Will be a great challenge for an excellent Buckeyes unit that finished second nationally in points per game allowed. I do think, as we're back here with Jake Butt, I do think it's different to look at these games, certainly far different than looking at the playoff, because part of what you're trying to factor in is who in the world is going to play in this game. And I think one of the things that's been encouraging here with Ohio State is there really haven't been many public opt-outs. I think we're just not clear. There haven't been as many public opt-ins. It feels like, it's unclear whether Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to play. It's unclear whether Travion Henderson's going to play. So it makes it difficult to evaluate. We obviously know Cal McCord's not going to play. He's in the portal. Devin Brown will be the quarterback. But as you look at this game and try to match the teams up against one another, how big a factor is that in terms of trying to assess what you're looking at?
Oh, it's a huge factor. Of course, Marvin Harrison might be a top 5 pick, right? So if he doesn't play, though Ohio State's loaded at the receiver position, it'd be a big loss. If Trey Henderson doesn't play, that'd be a big loss. But I want to just say this because, after Ohio State lost to Michigan, you start seeing guys enter the transfer portal. McCord enters the transfer portal. Of course, with signing day yesterday, there's narratives. Ohio State has been so successful for so long. There's a lot of people that are happy to see them, struggling. And I say struggling because you cannot culture. This is a perfect example to look at their culture. Marvin Harrison Jr. is practicing and even considering coming back. Trey Henderson considering coming back. So this team is, they are in a good spot. And as far as the matchup goes, Ohio State this year, the way they've won games is different from years in the past. It's been a defensive-led season. Their defense has been the strong point of the team. And I think that is a reason why I feel real good about the Buckeyes in this matchup. The defense will keep them in this game. And as far as the quarterback battle goes, Devin Brown and McCord were back and forth. Spring ball, camp, into the early part of the season. At some point, when McCord beat Notre Dame and led them on that final drive, there's no turning back now. He's the starter.
Right.
But we do not know what that meant for Devin Brown's development throughout the season. When you listen to the players talk about him and what he's done throughout this bowl prep, the guys are really excited to see him throw and go out there and be the starter, myself included.
Devin Brown was really good when we were at camp. And I truly believe that when we were there, they had not made a decision yet on who the quarterback would be. So, again, we can talk about what it means going forward. And I think it's different between saying, hey, this guy, we have faith in this guy. We think he's pretty good. Obviously, a freshman coming in who they like a lot versus are we standing pat? Are we not getting into the portal? I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. Yeah. But this is a quarterback that they believe in their program, no doubt. I do always think, though, that there is this notion, and especially in these games involving one team that's disappointed not to be in the playoff versus another that's had a year that maybe exceeded expectations. And you've spoken to part of this about the culture and the guys even considering playing. But Missouri is going to be fired up. There's no doubt they're going to be ready to go. Like, look at Tulane and USC last year. Tulane was delighted to be there, and USC realized they were a couple plays away from being in the playoff, and Tulane ended up winning the game. That, to me, is the challenge for Ohio State.
Absolutely. And you can listen to the way Missouri's staff is talking, their players. This is the most important game of their season. There is a little bit of a rivalry between the SEC and the Big Ten. Right. It is a point of pride. So for Missouri, they don't care who's opting in or opting out. They're playing Ohio State. They had a really good season this year. This would be the ice. They are no opt-outs from Missouri's end. They're going all in. But the flip side is also true. Ohio State, there's been no indication to say that this game doesn't matter equally as much. And the fact that it seems like the world is against Ohio State right now and are rooting for Missouri, I'm going to use that to my advantage if I'm the Buckeyes.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would agree with you. And absolutely, there's a ton of incentive on Missouri's side. I mean, this would be the 13th time they played. Missouri's won one time, right? I mean, to beat Ohio State would be a capper to a huge, huge year. But to write off the Buckeyes, I think there's not a ton of pride there, and that putting on that uniform doesn't matter to those guys. I think is to misunderstand this program greatly and what Ryan Day has built, as I know you feel the same way. Penn State also feels like it's going to have the bulk of its stars playing in their game against Ole Miss. Chop Robinson has publicly opted out. We know what a fabulous player he is on the defensive line. Aside from that, I mean, you've had some guys who have publicly opted in. Adisa Isaac is a great example. Not only did he opt in, but he kind of made a case of why it's important to play. I think this is a really interesting matchup of a dynamic offense in Ole Miss against one of the best defenses in college football in Penn State. What are you watching in this one?
Well, I just think about the state of college football, and it's like, okay, Penn State, you lost to two top 10 teams, two phenomenal teams. You're going to a New Year's Six Bowl for the third straight year now? Maybe is it second straight or third straight? They have been putting out great seasons, but in the 4-team playoff, it's boom or bust. It feels like it's a letdown if you don't make the playoff. Yeah. But the opportunity in this game is, they beat Iowa at home, and Iowa's a really damn good football team. They lost the ones they really would have liked to win. They would have at least one of them. Ole Miss is right there in that group of high-flying, great talent, great coach. They've had a great season. That's where Penn State can, man, you talk about momentum, the chance to beat a phenomenal Ole Miss football team and carry that momentum into the offseason. The challenge for them is you lost both coordinators. You know, how does that affect you? Penn State's strength is that exotic Manny Diaz-led defense, but he's not there. That in mind, I'm excited to see these guys play. They've played extremely hard every time they've taken the field. I think it'll benefit a young guy like Drew Aller to just breathe a little bit, take this month, and then go out and just put a stamp on this season, carry him into the offseason.
I do think both of those conversations highlight why the 12-team playoff is going to be a really good thing for college football, because we shouldn't only be talking about 2 games where you have a sense as to who's going to play. And that's really where we are right now. We know who's going to play in those 2 playoff semifinals. We don't know in the rest of the game. And look, you're the greatest example maybe of someone who played and got hurt, right? I mean, and had it damage their career. No one blames anyone for not playing, right? I mean, I totally get it. And I know you would play if you had the opportunity to do it again. You'd do exactly what you did, even knowing the result. That being said, like, I get why players are on the fence, and I think it's going to be a lot more fun next year when we'll have 6 high-profile games where we know who's playing.
100%. You know, it was Jalen Smith the year before me. I remember Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette sat out that year. I played and took that injury, and it certainly played a factor into why I'm sitting here today and not playing, which I'm happy. I'm nowhere I'd rather be than to be hanging out with. Sure. But listen, this is the state of college football. Coaches leave. You know, coaches leave before they have a chance to coach in their bowl. I respect the guys, man. If nothing else, the guys that choose to play, you get another chance, another point to say, you know what, you could have opted out. The fact that Marvin's a great example, a top 5 pick, choosing to practice and play, it is a great chance to look at the character of some of these young men.
No doubt. That being said, can't wait till next year.
And home playoff games next year.
It's going to be great.
Can you imagine?
No, it's really, really going to be fun. We're going to turn our attention to hockey next. We'll have more from Jake a little bit. Catching up on Big Ten hockey. Standings look different than in recent years. 2 really good stories, Michigan State and Wisconsin. Aiden Fink, Landon Slaggert leading the way offensively. And what a story Kyle McClellan has been. A Mercyhurst transfer. He struggled a year ago. He is leading the Big Ten in goals against average for Wisconsin. Paul Caponigri is here. We spoke last week, Paul, about kind of where things stood and brought people up to date on Big Ten hockey. We talked about Wisconsin. What a great story that's been. Michigan State. Want to get into some of the individuals here today. You're essentially at midseason, so we'll do some midseason awards. Been some really good freshmen in the Big Ten, so who would be your freshman of the year?
I've got a guy that came in late for Michigan State. A huge reason for where they're at is Artem Levshinov, a Belarusian player. He's kind of following in the footsteps of the great defensemen this league has had recently. You start with Quinn Hughes, Owen Power, to Luke Hughes, and now you got Artem Levshinov, who's getting a point a game. He just turned 18 in late October, so a young guy, but has stepped in and just been phenomenal for him on the background. Kind of, when you get a freshman to do this, it's kind of like a bonus, but he's come in and he's not had that freshman kind of like big eyes look. He's come in and been fantastic right off the bat.
And this is a guy who's very much on the NHL's radar, correct?
Yeah, he's a top, maybe the 3rd guy. There's 2 guys right up top that are clear, Celebrini and Yzerman, but he might be that 3rd guy taken. So like I said, another high draft pick defenseman coming out of the Big Ten.
Interesting. Coach of the year, I feel like I could do this one. I don't feel like
Yes, and you've spoken to him, but I think when there's 2 guys, I think, but the expectations were there for Michigan State a little bit more with Adam Nightingale. With Mike Hastings, you did not know. I mean, they were picked 5th to finish 5th. Now, we're only midway, but that's what the awards are. They're the middle of the season. Mike Hastings has been phenomenal. He's been everything they thought he would be when they decided to bring him in. They showed him the bag, and he has proven that in the first half and brought his culture in fast. It's really hard for a team to show that so quickly, but they started the season hot and they've continued throughout.
It's pretty crazy looking at his track record. I mean, this guy's never finished under 500, and then you come into a Wisconsin program that's only finished over 500 twice in the last 9 years, and then turn around. Now, part of it is, and we talked about this last week, part of it is you can turn your roster over more quickly than you used to be able to.
For sure. And he brought in a couple of his top players from Minnesota State, but that also shows they wanted to follow him because they believe in him so well. And I think that's what he gets players to believe in his systems right away, and they want to play for him. So his best players wanted to come with him. So I think that's just another tip to his cap for how he's been so good so quick.
And a really good story at a place that, when they are good, they love their Badger hockey.
Yeah.
So
Cole Center will be buzzing the
no
second
doubt.
half.
It is exciting to think about what could be down the road here, not just this year, but in the years to come. How about your goalie of the first half?
Well, I think you mentioned him earlier, and it's pretty. I think this was pretty easy. I mean, there's a lot of good goaltenders in the league, but Kyle McClellan has been just unbelievable in net for Wisconsin. He is in the top 4 in all important categories. Goals against, save percentage, wins, and shutouts. You can't, in the nation, not the Big Ten. He leads the Big Ten in all those. You can't, I mentioned it last week, it's such an important position in sports. And when you have that guy step up, and he's just been phenomenal, they build the confidence in his team, and he's just kind of started the season. He got the net, and Mike Hastings wasn't sure at first. They gave him the net, and he's just not giving it up.
How do you account for his improvement? Because when he did play last year, it wasn't great. Now, part of that was the team wasn't as good in front of him.
Sure.
But is it just getting more comfortable in the Big Ten? As we mentioned, he came from a lower level at Mercyhurst.
I think, when he's returning, he's familiar with the surroundings. He was kind of looked at, I think he thought he's going to get his shot. Last year, Jared Moe was kind of the number 1 guy. And when he would struggle, Kyle would get thrown in. So he's kind of in the part where hey, I've got this opportunity. This might be my last shot. I've seen it so many times when a guy's in their senior year. And goalie's just crazy. I would never tell my kid to play goalie because you're either in or you're out. You're either in or you're out. There's no in between there. But he's just been phenomenal. It's probably a mental thing for him. He's probably gotten comfortable. And Mike Hastings is really good at instilling confidence in players, and Kyle's taking advantage.
It's a cool story. It's really
awesome.
Great
it's another one similar to Justin Close a couple years ago.
Yes.
Very
he got
similar.
an opportunity in midseason
and take advantage.
And just seized it. Defensive player of the first half.
For me, the league is great. And this guy's funny because he's got the most points of any Big Ten player, too. But he's a defenseman. And that's just how good he is. And it's Seamus Casey.
That's the Norris Trophy, right? Offensive defenseman.
Yeah. Quinn Hughes right now is one of the top scoring defensemen in the NHL, and he's a front. But Seamus Casey has been phenomenal. A lot like Luke Hughes, get the Hughes brothers. 2 years ago, when he was overshadowed a little by Owen Power his freshman year, last year Seamus was overshadowed by Luke Hughes. So it's now his turn, and he's just been phenomenal. He's got vision. He can skate. I think his skating is what separates him. He's like a one-man human breakout. If they're having trouble in the zone, he can just use his wheels and get them out. And he kind of leads their defense, a very good defense. I think they need to play it up a little tighter as a team. But his change from defense to offense as that kind of 4th guy in the rush just separates his skill set, and he's got 23 points. He's got 23 in 18 games. A defenseman at Christmas is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, that's remarkable. If you were to choose from among those guys you singled out, who would be your top player of the first half of the season?
I'm going to go back to Kyle McClellan. The story helps it, obviously. But I said his numbers. He's nationally in the top 4 in all the categories that I said, all the more important ones. Right. And he's played the most games of those guys, too. So, some of those guys only played 10 games. So, the stats can be a little balloon there. He's played the most. He's been relied on the most. And Wisconsin is the number 1 defensive team in the country. They've given up the least amount of goals a game. And Kyle's the leader in that. So, when you're at the top of the league and you're at the top of all your stats, it was a pretty easy pick to put Kyle McClellan as Player of the Year.
Let's throw a few more names in there. Yes, first half. Let's throw a few more names in there and pick an all Big Ten team. Who are some of the other guys, aside from those who we've mentioned, who stand out?
Yeah, I guess the 2 guys, I love Landon Slaggert. He leads the Big Ten in goals. He's got 12. He's in the top 5 in the country. A really good bounce-back year for him. He only had 6 or 7 goals last year. He was preseason first team last year. Didn't have a great year. He has bounced back. He needed a little more help. I think he needs some guys to get on his train there. And then I love Ben Dexheimer. You talk about Wisconsin's defense. He's been a guy as a sophomore that's stepped up his game. He's a power play quarterback, but he does bring both elements, the offense and defense. So those guys, a team like Wisconsin, you're like, okay, how are they doing this? Yes, the goaltending, but they've got other guys doing it. Offensively, they do it as a big group, but defensively, Ben Dexheimer has been really solid.
Let's wrap it up with an all-freshman team, who are the stars of tomorrow, who are already shining today.
Yeah, I mean, it's in all sports right now. The freshmen come in and they just pop. Aiden Fink is tied with Seamus Casey as the most points in the Big Ten. He's a freshman. Trey Augustine, another guy with big expectations, has lived up to him. That's why Michigan State is up at the top. And with Sam Renzel, it's kind of weird not having many Gophers on these lists, but they're right on the mix. Sam Renzel is a first-round pick of Chicago Blackhawks. He's lived up to the hype, can improve more. But I'd hate to see, if you're putting a team out there, you had Artem Levshunov and Sam Renzel. It's big right-handed, first-round talent NHL guys. Pretty impressive.
Now, part of the thing with hockey is these guys aren't all 18 years old, right? I mean, a lot of these.
It's a mix.
Yeah. Juniors, right?
But Artem Levshunov was 17 when the season started.
Yeah, wow.
So it's a mix from 17 to 20.
Yeah.
Hockey is that one sport. I was an older freshman. It just,
right.
They give you, when you do that though, it backs everyone up, right? It's almost like the portal stuff and the fifth year COVID stuff. When you don't get that, you have a guy wait a little, we're going to bring this guy back for a fifth year, so we're going to have you play another year junior. It's a way to kind of string it along.
Well, we'll wrap it up here. Enjoy the time off.
Yes.
I know the calendar takes a little bit of a pause here.
About 10 days.
By and large.
A couple teams have holiday tournaments.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then we'll crank it up again.
Let's do it.
After New Year's and
it's cold
follow
out.
this race. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if that happens this year.
Yeah.
Back on Big Ten today, and very pleased to be joined by a couple of Michigan students, Emery Kaplan, Olivia DiMattia, both juniors at the University of Michigan, and fresh off the 12th ever Michigan Sports Business Conference. So I'm going to ask you first, give us a little background on this conference. Tell me what the story is here, Emery, and take us kind of back to the origins and where we are today.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having us.
Of course.
We're very grateful to be here and thankful to the Big Ten Network for having us again. In terms of the conference, the Michigan Sport Business Conference is the largest undergraduate-run sport business conference in the country. Every fall, dating back to 2012, we bring together current and future leaders in sports to talk about mainstream topics, give people a chance to network, and take the largest and biggest network in sports in Michigan and create this 1.5-day experience for this ecosystem to come to life.
So, Olivia, give us a sense of kind of what the conference entails. Like, what is this day and a half about? What happens when you're there?
So our main goal is to combine everything sport and business and what's going on in that entire atmosphere, like Emery was just saying. We have keynotes. This year we had Jessica Berman, the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, Stephen A. Smith from ESPN. We had a keynote media panel featuring executives from all across the nation. And it was truly amazing, truly inspiring. But even more than that, we got into panel discussions with emerging IPs and assets and what's going on in that world. We went into Las Vegas, becoming a sports city, what the Super Bowl halftime show is going to look like this year. We got a little bit the inside scoops. And then marketing, law, finance, anything in the sports world, we discussed.
And what's kind of the goal here? I mean, give me a sense of what you're trying to accomplish with this conference.
Simple. We want to connect the current and future leaders of the sport business world.
Okay. And how do you guys go about planning it? I mean, obviously, you each have a role. Tell me what your role is and how that integrates into building this program each year.
Yeah, definitely. So we're a club on campus. Like, we recruit students who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, right, to join this club. But when they join the club, they're really a part of this annual startup, right? Like, we have a mission of that at the start was to bring together current and future leaders in sport business. But every year, the speakers change, the partners change, the panels change. And so my role as the VP of Corporate Partnerships and all partnerships overall is to bring in brands that either want to access our network, want to connect with students. This year we had over 1,100 attendees. We had students from more than 30 universities attend from more than 30 unique majors. And with that audience, you have brands, sports teams, leagues, media brands and marketing agencies that want to connect with our students, recruit them for jobs as these students are elite talent opportunities, and also brands that want to market their product to college-age students. It's very rare that you got to come to a conference, meet 800 students at the same time who can scan a QR code, download your app. I mean, this has been the year of ROI for us in a lot of ways, whether it's like, trying to find ways to give value to our partners who are paying us, a student-run conference, to put on actual value for them in this 1.5 day.
So that's your role. What's yours, Olivia?
So I am the media relations manager for the conference, as well as an account manager for partnerships. So I work with Emory on everything, so we've become kind of a dynamic duo this year, which has been super, super fun. But from a media standpoint, I came into the conference, this is my first year, and I saw that media coverage was something that we had lacked. It was something we needed to grow in, and I was ready to kind of take the next steps in doing so. So I worked with Emory, I worked with my amazing mentors, and we laid out a plan for what we wanted to do. And so this year was kind of the initiation of that. And I mean, it's really come into fruition. I mean, we did a 2-part media series with Big Ten Network, so super excited about that. And now we are working with Sport Business Journal, Sportigo, and other outlets on post-conference coverage. So excited to kind of see where that goes.
What's been the most memorable part of this? Like at the conferences you've attended,
Yeah.
Is there one thing that you think about that just has resonated the most with you?
Yeah, so I attended as a freshman. Someone told me that this was networking on steroids. And so I bought a ticket, right, for the low-cost option of like $35.
Yeah.
And I showed up and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I want to build this conference. So I applied. I was on the partnerships team last year as an account manager, and I had a small kind of tidbit of what the conference entails as a student. You're talking to these brands. You're trying to figure out what their value proposition is, what's your value proposition. But this year I was in a leadership role. So from a professional standpoint, from a conference standpoint, we sold 49% more conference and partnership revenue than we ever have in any year before. And I think that it's been an amazing leadership opportunity for me to talk to these brands, learn how to sell to people, learn how to lead a team. Our whole team is either my age or older, and I had to kind of manage those challenges and expectations and teaching. And we kind of go through 3 phases. The first phase is like the teaching phase when you join the team from January to April. And from April until the fall, we're selling. And in the fall, it's all about execution and continuing to kind of learn and nurture those relationships with those brands. So my favorite memory has been the entire experience. I mean, if we're very results oriented and partners don't want to give us money, then we can't think that way. We're very process oriented. Each day coming with energy and excitement and being thankful for the opportunity to kind of talk to these brands and be in this opportunity, be at this school. So my favorite memory has been the entire experience, really.
But really more so the planning of it, it sounds like.
The process. I love
Right.
the day-to-day grind of the entire experience, right?
You should play for Nick Saban. He loves the process too. Yeah.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
And I think that reaching out to a company and them giving you an email response and then having a call and then maybe they say yes, maybe they say no. The process of getting from point A to point B over a span of 6 to 8 months makes the achievement that we've had in the past 2 or 3 weeks in the conference on November 3rd all the more worthwhile.
How about for you, Olivia? Was there a moment at the conference this year where you say, man, I'm always going to remember that?
So I got a piece of advice from one of my mentors, Jessica Kleiman, right before the conference, and she was like, make sure to take a second to look back and take a breath and realize that you put this together. You guys did this, and you should be proud of yourself. And coming into the conference this year, I didn't know what to expect. So I worked hard, and I was working with Emory and the rest of our team nonstop. But then when I got to the conference, one of the accounts I was on was William Morris Endeavor, and I was able to plan a breakfast panel with a ton of agents, and we spoke, and it was absolutely amazing. But being able to just be up there and look at the crowd and be like, wow, from initiation to execution, I built out this entire partnership, this entire relationship, and I was so proud of not only myself, but just the team kind of coming together and learning from Emory that open communication that we always had with one another was just so impactful and was a skill that I will continue to use.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice for all of life, right? Is as you're along the way, take a moment to look at what you've accomplished and savor it. And so it's wonderful that you have. In every endeavor in life, you're always asked, what's next? So how can you move this forward next year? Is there something in particular you want to do that you want to include that maybe wasn't included this past year?
So I joined MSBC under co-presidents John Grossman and Isabel Wilson, and they kind of continued the trend of innovation and creativity and really nailed that on the head for our team. And so taking that, making that our core and using that for next year, as Emory stated earlier, bigger and better was our goal this year, and continuing that is kind of what's next in store for us, whether it be opening up the conversation to different topics in the sport industry or bringing in a whole new criteria of speakers or elements to the conference that we don't even know yet. That's what the whole brainstorming part's for.
Yeah, are there different topics that maybe you wanted to cover that you didn't, or kind of emerging areas that you think, well, this is something that maybe we hadn't thought about that would interest people?
Well, I think in the last 3 weeks we've seen that the topics and information discussed at the conference has resulted in actual real-world implications.
Like what?
Like the NWSL just signed a massive 4-year media rights deal right after Jessica Berman, their commissioner, spoke at our conference. And we're looking at the entire sports media landscape, and we're looking at Las Vegas as a sports city growing. The Athletics just confirmed that they're moving to Vegas in the next few years. So from a this year standpoint, the conversations that happen are valuable and they have real-world implications. Going forward, I think 2 topics continue to interest me. The first is the globalization of the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball. We are seeing these massive streaming media and media deals continue to transform sports media and these leagues in particular. But if there is an entire new audience to tap into, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Australia, I mean, these valuations and these understandings of these leagues and what their value proposition is will be transformative. I mean, we've seen American football and baseball and basketball transform America, but we haven't seen it fully transform other countries. And if that happens, there's going to be crazy opportunities for growth for a lot of different parties involved.
Olivia, and I ask you the same question. What interests you that maybe you didn't get to this year?
I think what's been blowing up just everywhere right now is the topics of AI, virtual reality, and then obviously sports, and now seeing kind of them all come together as a possibility. Seeing where that kind of takes the sport media landscape is going to be really interesting, especially in terms of fan experience, fan engagement. So seeing what they do to that is definitely a trend that I will be following.
Olivia DiMattia, Emery Kaplan, really a pleasure to visit with both of you. Congratulations on this. I mean, it really sounds like it is an amazing experience for you and for all the people who attend. So it's really a win-win. Congratulations. Looking forward to hearing what happens in year 13. It'll be lucky year 13.
Thank you so much.
Yep. We wanted to talk about some non-bowl headlines. We touched a little bit on the Ohio State quarterback situation. Kyle McCord, obviously, in the portal, headed to Syracuse. What's your take on what this means for Ohio State, both now and then, more importantly, kind of going forward here at that spot?
My take is, and this will be confirmed when they play Missouri for Ohio State, but my take is the fact that when McCord entered the portal, I assumed they're going to go hand pick a quarterback. If I was a quarterback, I would want to play in Columbus, just looking at it as they've developed it. But they haven't. So I think what they're telling us is, Devin Brown has developed all year, and they're excited to see him hit his stride. There's also a big advantage with the month off to say, what does he do well within our offense? Let's scheme to that. So it's kind of like a first game in the sense, but it's also the last game, so you can empty out the playbook and really put it on the table. If he can have a good performance, what does that mean for Ohio State going forward? Been in a good spot.
One thing I thought spoke volumes is that Jeremiah Smith, the #1 prospect in the country, a wide receiver, committed there yesterday.
Yeah.
He clearly isn't concerned that quarterback is going to be an issue for Ohio State. I do think that tells you something.
Absolutely.
What about Penn State? 2 new coordinators. Obviously, we know about Tom Allen on the defensive side, but not necessarily how you think it's going to impact the bowl. I mean, we already kind of touched on that, but just big picture what this means for James Franklin's program.
Love the fit. James Franklin seems to prefer like an aggressive defense, right? And Tom Allen fits that mold. Also, the fact that you have head coaching experience to then coordinator. Usually it's coordinator to head coach. There's value in that. Manny Diaz was a head coach before he came. You're the head coach of your unit. So I think that's great. And then for Nicky coming over from Kansas, how about this? So he joins Kansas. At one point, he was on the Broyles Award. He was eligible. Kansas in 2021 was 0-9. In 2022, they're 6-7. This past year, they're 8-4. So that's a program that you never talked about football. He certainly played a big part in getting them back on schedule. So, and it was a exotic, fun offense.
That's what I was going
right?
to say. It may have been, watching them against Illinois, that may have been the most enjoyable offense to watch that I saw this year.
Exactly.
Unless you're an Illinois fan, in which case it was like, man, can they stop these guys?
So I can't wait to watch in that sense. It's going to be creative. That they have talent. They continue to recruit well. Confirmed once again yesterday. They're just what's that next level? I like the hires.
Let's talk about the 2 new head coaches, Jonathan Smith, Kurt Cignetti. Obviously, we knew about David Braun because that had already happened. But basically, since the season ended, those 2, what are your takes?
Indiana, so a couple guys enter the portal, decide to come back. He gets a quarterback right away. He's clear for Cignetti, clearly passionate about this job. clearly
Would you say
confident about his
self-confident? Yeah,
job.
I feel he's self-confident.
He's ready to go to work, okay? On the flip side for Jonathan Smith, if I'm a Spartan fan right now, I'd be really, really happy because they're just quietly building a team. You know, a lot of our conversation is elsewhere. And yet, how about Joe Rossi? Bringing him in, that might be one of the best hires across the entire conference. A phenomenal hire. He gets his quarterback. They get a nice recruiting class. They're just in a really good spot to get this thing going in the right direction.
I'm with you. I think both those programs have to feel great here early on about the job that each one of those coaches has done. You spent 4 hours on recruiting yesterday. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to give me a recruiting takeaway.
Nebraska, another team in a great place. Highest rated prospect since 2006 in Raiola. Great get for them. I like where they're going. And then the winner of yesterday to me is Oregon.
Yeah.
You got your quarterback today. You got your quarterback tomorrow. That program is in a phenomenal spot. If you want to talk about the best team to compete next year, Oregon's in that conversation.
Cannot wait for next season in the Big Ten. We have so many good games. Bruce Weber with me to talk hoops tomorrow. See you then.